So we have the best fight in boxing coming up on July 29th between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And I apologize if my voice sounds slightly different. I'm just at the end of fighting a cold. Here's why I am picking Terence Crawford to win this fight. Here's why Terence Crawford wins. Now, there's multiple reasons to pick both fighters in this fight and multiple different attributes that both fighters have. However, the first reason and attribute for Terence Crawford is adaptations. I believe that I am very confident Terence Crawford is much better at adapting to his opponent than Errol Spence. He is very good at figuring his fighters out. He's very fundamentally sound and has a very, very high ring IQ. And we've seen in Terence Crawford's career that whenever he isn't fully dominating a fight, by the second half of the fight, he will take over. When you look at all the fights where he's given up rounds and had his difficulties, he never lost rounds or gave up rounds in the later half of a fight, unless the fight was a stoppage, obviously. When you look at the Sean Porter fight, he figured Porter out, I'd say, after round 9, even by round 8 and 9, you could tell Crawford was starting to adjust better. In round 10, he was able to put him away. When you look at Mean Machine, he had some issues early, and he eventually figured him out and broke him down and adjusted. When you look at Jose Benavidez Jr., that's a guy where he had some issues in the first half of the fight, but figured him out and dominated. Just throughout his entire career. When you look at Hank Lundy, he lost the first couple rounds, figured him out, adapted, and dominated. Same for Thomas Delorme or Yurkis Gamboa, Ricky Burns, etc. He'll have some issues early on in the fight, but he'll adjust to them because he's extremely adaptive and makes multiple adaptations in a fight. And because of that, I believe that's a very strong strength for Crawford, and the first reason why he wins this fight is adaptations. The second reason is Terence Crawford has a chip on his shoulder. Now, what I mean by this is Crawford has been getting criticized and made fun of and even clowned by many for a long time. One reason is people complain about his resume. Another reason is people complain about him being on the pound-for-pound list, being so high on that list. People talk about his inactivity. He's been accused of ducking in the past, which we all know is foolishness. Crawford has been not necessarily targeted, but he's definitely been discredited by many in the past. And I believe that chip on his shoulder is definitely going to help him in this fight, and is definitely going to be in his favor. So Crawford having a chip on his shoulder, as we know, Terence Crawford, he fights very vengefully in the ring. He does not punch with good intentions. He punches with bad intentions. And whenever Terence Crawford has had a true chip on his shoulder in the past, he's come to life. And I believe against Errol Spence, he will have a chip on his shoulder, and that will heavily benefit him in this fight. The third reason that Crawford wins this fight is activity. Now, neither fighter in their careers have been super active. When you look at their careers, Errol Spence since 2018, has only fought, since 2019, he's only fought 2 times. And prior to 2019, he's only fought 4 times in his entire career. He fought in March of 2019, September of 2019, December of 2020, and April of 2022. He's been very inactive. Now, Terence Crawford has not been active himself. He's been quite inactive as well. However, he does not have a 15-month layoff like Errol Spence will when this fight happens. He'll only have a 7.5-month layoff. To put that into perspective, if you put Terence Crawford's layoff since his last fight against Avanesian before Errol Spence, and you multiply that by 2, you get 1 Errol Spence layoff. So Terence Crawford has been more active than Spence. He's going to be less rusty, and that will favor him in this fight. Now, the fourth reason that Terence Crawford wins this fight and that I'm picking him is his phenomenal counterpunching. Terence Crawford may very well be the best counterpuncher in the sport, if not the best, one of the best, and definitely a better counterpuncher than Errol Spence. We've seen him throughout his entire career hurt multiple opponents, stop multiple opponents, and drop multiple opponents with counter shots and shots in combinations where both fighters are throwing, and Crawford will land and his opponent will miss. Terence Crawford's a great counterpuncher, which also has to do with his adaptive ability, which was my first reason that I listed. His counterpunching will be very efficient in this fight. It'll be very good, and that'll heavily benefit him. When Errol Spence pressures and comes forward and tries getting Crawford on the ropes and opens himself up to counter shots like he did against Emmanuel Larte, the one time Errol Spence was very noticeably hurt in his career, as well as the Ugas fight where he was also countered before getting hit with that perfect right hand from Ugas right after. Spence is not immune to counter shots, and Terence Crawford is a great counterpuncher, and that's definitely another reason that Crawford could win this fight. And the fifth reason that I would pick Terence Crawford to win this fight is out of the ring consistency. Now, when you look at both fighters throughout their careers, when you see in between fights how they're looking and the behavior they are publicly showing, Terence Crawford has a huge advantage. Now, I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not going to insult anyone. I'm just going to make an assessment of what I've seen and what I've noticed. Errol Spence between fights will usually balloon up in weight, noticeably, probably 180, 185, maybe even slightly more. Terence Crawford would usually obviously gain a little bit of weight like all fighters do, but not gain much, probably gain 15, 20 pounds at most. And even then, he still looks like he's in pretty good shape. He's always training year-round. Errol Spence doesn't seem like the guy who's always training, because we see constant videos of him looking way out of shape, him partying. And I'm not saying he can't party and train simultaneously, but there are periods of time where Errol Spence doesn't notify anyone that he's training. And when you see interviews of him and videos of him, he definitely doesn't look like he's been training, if you know what I mean. We've seen Errol Spence have some disputes when it came to him having the car accident, which definitely isn't going to favor Errol Spence in this fight. You know, when you get into a car crash, there's no way that doesn't have some type of effect on you. And we saw in the Ugas fight, he got hurt by a shot he probably wouldn't get hurt by. Against Danny Garcia, he fought very cautiously, did not look that great. The Danny Garcia fight, he had much more issues than people talk about. Ugas was a great outing from Errol, arguably the best of his career. But out-of-ring consistency is not going to help Errol Spence. We've seen him get drunk in videos. We've seen him balloon up in weight. We've seen him have many disputes, many private issues. And Terence Crawford, no one's perfect, right? But Terence Crawford's always looking phenomenal. In training, his shape always looks phenomenal when he's out of the ring. And I think the out-of-ring consistency is heavily going to favor Terence Crawford. So for all the reasons listed in this video, this is why Terence Crawford defeats Errol Spence. Quick little recap over the 5 reasons. Number 1, adaptations. Terence Crawford's adaptive ability will definitely help him in this fight. He turns up the pace much better in the later rounds, and he has a higher ring IQ than Errol, which in my opinion will help him adapt to Errol in the later rounds. We know Crawford's not a quick starter, and he's going to give away some early rounds, but once he figures Errol Spence out, he's going to really put it on him. The second reason is chip on his shoulder. Terence Crawford getting criticized by many, disrespected by many even, will definitely add a fuel to his fire and will help him in this fight. The third reason is activity. Errol Spence has been out of the ring for 15 months once this fight happens. Crawford only been out of the ring for 7.5 months once this fight happens, as well as Crawford having more fights since 2018 than Errol Spence. Counterpunching is the fourth reason. Terence Crawford's a phenomenal counterpuncher, one of the best in the sport. Errol Spence leaves himself open to counters very often, is very aggressive, and because of that, and has a very high output, and because of that, will be very, very possibly get counterpunched in this fight. And the fifth reason, out of ring consistency. In between fights and when they're not fighting, Terence Crawford is always training, looks in better shape than Errol, and looks healthier, while Errol balloons up in weight and doesn't seem to be as disciplined as Terence Crawford. That's the 5 reasons. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. What's your prediction? Who are you picking? Who are you favoring? Have a good one. Tell me your thoughts and your official prediction. God bless, guys. I'll see you guys later. Peace.